Take the money, Evan Miller, and disappear before he remembers you were ever here. The check lay between us on the polished marble table like something alive, bright white, perfectly clean, and cruel enough to make my fingers go cold. $50,000. More money than I had ever seen in one place. More than my mother had left behind after 3 years of hospital bills. More than my little sister Lily's prescriptions, rent, groceries, bus passes, and every overdue notice taped inside our kitchen cabinet combined. The man who pushed it toward me did not look angry. That was the worst part. Mr. Whitmore looked bored, as if removing a poor Omega from his son's life was just another unpleasant errand on a Thursday night. Behind him, the hotel lobby glowed with gold chandeliers and tall glass windows streaked by rain. Everyone moved quietly here. Bellhops in pressed uniforms. Women in silk coats. Men with watches that cost more than my entire apartment building. And then there was me, standing in a damp diner jacket with a torn cuff, my shoes leaving small dark marks on the marble floor. I had come straight from a 12-hour shift. There was still coffee dried beneath my thumbnail. I smelled faintly of fryer oil, lemon cleaner, and the apple pie I had packed but forgotten to eat. "I'm not taking that," I said, though my voice came out smaller than I wanted. Mr. Whitmore's pale eyes moved over me, not with hatred, but with the kind of disappointment people saved for stains on expensive fabric. Pride is charming when it belongs to people who can afford it. I folded my hands so he wouldn't see them shake. "Caleb knows I'm here?" For the first time, something like amusement touched his mouth. He glanced past my shoulder. Not much. Just enough. And that was when I turned. Caleb Whitmore stood near the far column, half hidden in the amber shadow of the lobby bar. Tall, still, dressed in a black coat that made him look even colder than the rain outside. His face was unreadable, the same face the business magazines loved to print under headlines about power, discipline, and impossible success. But his right hand was closed so tightly around a glass of water that his knuckles had gone white. He had heard everything. Every word. Every insult. Every quiet little reminder that I did not belong in his world. I waited for him to speak. One word would have been enough. "Evan, stay." "Father, stop." Anything. The silence stretched until it became a room of its own, wide and airless, and I understood too late that sometimes a person could hurt you without ever raising his voice. I looked back at the check, then at the man who had written it, and pushed it gently across the table. "Tell your son I hope he sleeps better," I said. Mr. Whitmore's expression finally changed, but I didn't stay to see what it became. I walked out through the revolving doors into the cold rain, Caleb's coat still wrapped around my shoulders from the night he had found me shivering at the bus stop. It was too warm. That was the cruelest thing. It still carried the clean, quiet scent of cedar, winter air, and the first place I had almost mistaken for home. 3 months before I walked out of that hotel with Caleb Whitmore's coat on my shoulders and rain in my shoes, he was just the man who came into Rosie's diner at 2:13 every morning and ordered food he never touched. I noticed the time because I noticed small things for a living. When you worked the graveyard shift in a 24-hour diner off Interstate 95, small things kept you awake. The crack in booth 6 that caught people's sleeves. The old coffee machine that hissed before it spat. The trucker who always asked for extra napkins but never used them. And the alpha in the expensive black coat who sat in the last booth by the window, ordered tomato soup and black tea, then stared at both until they went cold. The first night he came in, I almost asked if he was lost. Men like him did not belong under flickering fluorescent lights beside laminated menus sticky with syrup. He looked like glass towers, private elevators, and quiet rooms where nobody had to check the price before saying yes. I looked like what I was, 22 years old, tired down to the bone, wearing a faded blue uniform with Evan stitched crookedly above my chest because Rosie bought second-hand shirts in bulk and never checked the names. Still, he looked more out of place than I did. Not uncomfortable. Not nervous. Just empty, in a way that made the space around him feel too large. "Anything else?" I asked after setting his tea down. He looked up slowly, as if returning from somewhere far away. His eyes were gray, colder than the rain sliding down the window behind him. No. His voice was low, controlled, polite enough to be distant. Thank you? Most alphas filled the room without trying. Their confidence rolled ahead of them like heat from pavement in July. Caleb Whitmore was different. His presence was quiet, almost carefully folded in, but every person in the diner felt it anyway. Rosie stopped counting cash. The cook lowered the radio. Even the drunk college kids in booth 3 quit laughing so loud. I should have been afraid of him. Maybe I was. But fear was a luxury I had used up on rent notices, Lily's inhaler refills, and the red numbers on the electric bill. At 4 a.m, when he left, I found the soup untouched, the tea untouched, and $100 bill tucked beneath the cup. My face burned so hard I almost chased him into the parking lot to give it back. I did not want charity. I did not want some rich alpha mistaking my exhaustion for permission to pity me. But Lily had a doctor's appointment that week, and pride did not pay co-pays. So I kept $20 for the meal, folded the rest into a clean napkin, and saved it behind the register in case he came back. He did. The next night. Same time. Same booth. Same order. This time, I placed the napkin beside his tea without looking at him. You overpaid yesterday. He stared at the money, then at me. For a second, I thought I had offended him. Instead, something shifted in his expression, so small I nearly missed it. Not a smile. Not warmth. More like surprise, the kind a person feels when a locked door opens from the inside. Keep it, he said. I cannot. Why? I wiped an invisible spot from the table because looking straight at him felt too honest. Because then I will wonder what you think I owe you. The diner went quiet around us, or maybe I only imagined it. Caleb did not answer. Right away. Outside, a semi-truck passed, throwing white light across his face, and leaving him in shadow again. Finally, he pushed the napkin back toward me with 2 fingers. Then buy yourself dinner, he said. You look like someone who keeps giving hers away. My hand froze on the edge of the table. I had not told him about Lily. I had not told anyone how I packed half my meals into paper bags and pretended I was not hungry. But in his untouched bowl of soup, in his tired eyes, in the way he knew too much without asking, I felt the first small tug of something dangerous. Not romance. Not yet. Curiosity. And worse than that, recognition. By the 5th night, I had stopped pretending not to expect him. I still told myself it was nothing. Customers had routines. Truckers liked the same pie. Nurses ordered coffee with exactly 3 sugars. Lonely rich men could sit in the same booth and let tomato soup turn cold if that was how they survived the night. But at 2:12, I caught myself wiping the window table twice. At 2:13, the bell above the door rang, and my fingers tightened around the coffee pot before I even looked up. Caleb Whitmore stepped in with rain shining on the shoulders of his black coat, his face unreadable, his presence making the late-night noise of the diner soften around the edges. He did not look at anyone else. Just me. It should have felt arrogant. Instead, it felt like being noticed by someone who had forgotten how to ask for help. You are late, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes moved to the clock above the pie case. 2:14. 1 minute. That is how lateness works. For a moment, his mouth changed. Not a smile exactly, but close enough that I turned toward the counter before he could see my surprise. I brought him the usual without asking. Tea. Soup. A glass of ice water he never drank. When I set them down, his gaze flicked to the bandage on my thumb. I had cut it opening a box of frozen fries an hour earlier. It was tiny, barely anything, but Caleb stared as if the whole room had narrowed to that little strip of white gauze. Who did that? He asked. The temperature in his voice dropped so fast I nearly laughed from nerves. A very dangerous cardboard box. He looked back at me, and the severity in his expression loosened, thread by thread. You should be more careful. I work in a diner at 3 in the morning. Careful left around midnight. This time, he did smile, faint and brief, like a porch light seen from the highway. Then the kitchen door swung open behind me, and Rosie called for me to grab mop water because the hallway sink had backed up again. I apologized and hurried away, grateful for the excuse to breathe. The storage hallway at Rosie's was narrow enough that 2 people could not pass without turning sideways. It smelled like dish soap, old onions, and the cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling. I was on my knees trying to twist the mop bucket wheel free when the lights flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the hallway. I held still, listening to the rain hammer the back door and the low hum of the emergency sign above the exit. Evan? Caleb's voice came from the front of the diner, closer than it should have been. I am fine, I called. It is just the breaker. A second later, he appeared at the end of the hall, his phone flashlight cutting a clean white line through the dark. In the cramped space, he looked impossibly tall, too polished for peeling paint and wet floor signs. You did not answer right away. You waited half a second. Long enough. The words were quiet, but something in them made my chest ache. He stepped closer, then stopped when he realized there was hardly any room between us. For once, the great Caleb Whitmore looked uncertain. May I? He asked, nodding toward the mop bucket. No alpha had ever asked me that gently for anything. I shifted aside, and his sleeve brushed my shoulder as he crouched beside me. He smelled like cedar, cold rain, and something tired beneath both. Together, we pulled the wheel loose. It came free so suddenly that I slipped, and his hand caught my elbow, firm but careful, stopping the fall before it became embarrassing. Neither of us moved. His thumb rested over the faded cuff of my uniform. His face was close enough for me to see the shadows under his eyes. You are shaking, he said. I wanted to blame the dark, the cold, the long shift. Instead, I whispered, people like you usually do not come into hallways for people like me. His hand loosened at once, but he did not step back. People like me are usually cowards, he said. The power came back with a hard buzz, flooding the hallway in yellow light. From the diner, someone complained about the coffee getting cold. Caleb stood first and offered me his hand. I should not have taken it. I did anyway. And when we walked back out, he became untouchable again, silent and composed as every head turned toward him. But his fingers, just before letting go of mine, pressed once against my palm, so lightly I almost wondered if I had imagined it. The next night, Caleb did not come at 2:13. I told myself I was relieved. I had a thumb wrapped in cheap gauze, 6 tables to clean, and a stack of unpaid bills folded inside my backpack like a second spine. I did not have room in my life to worry about a man who wore coats that probably had their own insurance policy. Still, by 2:30, I had reheated the tomato soup twice. By 2:45, I threw it out, annoyed at myself for caring. Rosie noticed, of course. Rosie noticed everything except expiration dates and broken ceiling tiles. You waiting on your ghost, Prince? She asked, leaning against the counter with a cigarette she never lit because the county inspector had scared her straight in 2017. I nearly dropped a spoon. He is a customer. Sure. And I am Dolly Parton. You do not have the hair for it. That is hurtful, Evan. I laughed because it was easier than admitting my chest felt strangely hollow. But the laugh faded when the bell over the door rang and a man in a gray suit stepped inside instead. He was not Caleb. He was younger, sharp-faced, and smiling too much. He ordered coffee, asked for me by name, and kept looking around the diner as if checking whether the walls could hear him. Mr. Whitmore wanted to make sure you got home safely after your shift, he said, sliding a small black business card across the counter. A car is waiting outside. Heat rushed to my face, fast and humiliating. Rosie's. Eyebrows climbed. The cook pretended not to listen and failed beautifully. I stared at the card. Whitmore Security. My name printed on a temporary pass below it. I did not ask for that. No, sir. Then why is it here? The man's smile tightened. Mr. Whitmore is thorough. Thorough. That word landed wrong. It turned the hallway, the hand at my elbow, the quiet may I, into something planned and polished. A rich alpha saw a tired Omega in a diner and decided to arrange him like furniture. My embarrassment sharpened into anger. I pushed the card back. Tell Mr. Whitmore I take the bus. It is raining. Buses work in rain. This neighborhood is not safe after 3 in the morning. That was when a low voice behind him said, Then say that to me, not to him. Caleb stood in the doorway with rain in his hair and no coat, as if he had stepped out of the night before it could finish with him. The man in the gray suit straightened so quickly he almost knocked over his coffee. Sir, I was only following the instruction to provide transportation. Caleb's eyes moved once to the card, then to my face. In public, all the softness vanished from him. He became still, cold, impossible to read. You were instructed to offer, he said. Not corner. The difference was small. It should not have mattered. But it did. The gray-suited man apologized and left so quickly the bell above the door barely had time to ring. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Rosie whispered, Well, Dolly Parton needs a refill, and escaped to the kitchen like a coward. I should have thanked Caleb. Instead, I grabbed a rag and wiped an already cleaned counter. You sent someone to watch me. To drive you home? Without asking. His jaw tightened. Yes. That single word surprised me more than an excuse would have. He did not dress it up. He did not pretend it was noble. He just stood there, wet from the rain, looking at me like my anger was something he had decided to accept. I am not a problem you can solve with staff, I said. I know. Do you? My voice cracked on the question, and I hated that more than anything. Caleb looked toward the window, where his reflection hovered over mine in the dark glass. For the first time, he seemed older than 31. Not powerful. Just tired. My mother used to take the bus home from the community kitchen every night, he said quietly. My father always offered a car. She always said no. She said people who serve a neighborhood should not be afraid to walk through it. His fingers flexed at his side. One winter, she slipped on the ice 2 blocks from home. She got sick after that. Pneumonia. Complications. I was 15, and I remember thinking if I had been stronger, if I had insisted, if I had done something before it was too late. He stopped, and the diner sounds came back softly around us. The coffee machine breathing, the rain tapping the glass, Rosie banging a pan too loudly in the kitchen because she was absolutely still listening. My anger did not disappear. It changed shape. Caleb, I said softer now, I am not your mother. His eyes returned to mine. I know. Then, after a pause, that is what scares me. I had no answer for that. He reached into his pocket, placed $2.50 on the counter, exact fare for the night bus, then stepped back. May I wait outside until it comes? The question sat between us, careful and awkward and almost funny in its seriousness. I looked at the coins, then at his expensive shoes already soaked from the rain. You are going to stand in the rain for 20 minutes? Probably 22. The schedule online is optimistic. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Small. Unsteady. Real. Caleb looked at it like he had been given something fragile. I slid the coins back toward him. Fine. But if you get pneumonia, I am not responsible. He nodded once. Understood. But when my shift ended and I stepped outside, he was not waiting alone. On the bench beside the bus sign sat a paper bag from Rosie's, warm at the bottom. Tomato soup, 2 spoons, and a note in Rosie's messy handwriting that said, Since both of you are idiots, eat. The soup was still warm when I sat beside Caleb under the bus shelter, though either of us seemed brave enough to touch it at first. Rain rolled down the plastic roof in thin silver lines, and the street beyond Rosie's diner shone black under the traffic lights. At that hour, the city felt less like a place people lived and more like something left running after everyone had gone home. Caleb sat on the far end of the bench, leaving more space between us than the shelter required. His shoulders were damp. His hair, usually perfect, had fallen slightly over his forehead, and for some reason that small disorder made him look more human than all the polished silence ever had. "Rosie thinks we are idiots," I said. "Rosie appears observant." I huffed a laugh and finally opened the paper bag. 2 spoons, 2 napkins, 2 containers of tomato soup, and 4 saltine crackers wrapped in plastic. She had added a slice of apple pie too, probably because she was nosy and sentimental and believed sugar could repair anything short of a broken transmission. I handed Caleb 1 container. "You know, most people eat soup while it is hot." He looked down at it like the cardboard bowl contained a difficult memory. "My mother made tomato soup every Sunday." His voice was quiet enough that the rain almost covered it. "Not the fancy kind. Canned tomatoes, butter, too much pepper. She said rich people ruined soup by trying to make it impressive." I smiled before I could help it. "She sounds smart." She was. He took the spoon but did not eat. "She opened a community kitchen in South Baltimore when I was 12. My father hated it. He said Whitmore's donated through foundations, not by standing behind counters with stained aprons." The corner of his mouth moved, but there was no humor in it. She ignored him. "Every Sunday, she made tomato soup and grilled cheese for anyone who came in." I could picture it too easily. A woman in a warm kitchen. Steam fogging the windows. People lining up not just for food, but for the feeling of being expected. "Did you help?" I asked. Caleb stared out at the empty road. "I complained. I was 15 and stupid. I thought spending Sundays there made me look less important." He swallowed, and the sound was small. "The last argument we had was about that kitchen. I told her I was tired of smelling like soup in front of my classmates. She laughed and said someday I would miss being useful." The bus sign flickered above us. Still 8 minutes away, according to the schedule nobody trusted. I held my soup tighter, letting the heat sting my palms through the cardboard. "After she died, my father closed it," Caleb said. He had the sign taken down before the week was over. I was too angry to stop him, or maybe too much like him to understand what he was taking. For a while, I did not say anything. People always expected poor folks to have the sad stories, the ones wrapped in overdue bills and cheap medication and fridges that hummed louder when they were empty. But grief did not check bank accounts. Loneliness did not care whether your sheets were cotton or silk. "My mom used to stretch a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store for 3 days," I said. "First night was dinner. Second night was sandwiches. Third night was soup if we had carrots. She called it financial planning." Caleb looked at me then, really looked, and something in his face softened at the edges. "Did it work?" "Not even a little. But Lily loved it. She thought we were having 3 different meals because Mom was magic." I smiled, but it wobbled. After Mom passed, I tried to make it the same way. Burned the onions, forgot the salt, cried into the pot like an idiot. "Did Lily eat it?" she asked for seconds. My throat tightened around the memory. That is when I knew I could not fall apart. Not where she could see. Caleb's hand shifted on the bench, not reaching for mine, just moving a little closer. "Careful. Asking without asking? That is a heavy thing to know at 22. You knew it at 15. He lowered his eyes. The bus turned the corner at the end of the block, its headlights smearing through the rain. I should have stood. Instead, I opened the crackers and dropped 2 into his soup. "Your mom was right," I said. "Soup does not need to be impressive." Caleb stared at the softened crackers, then took one slow bite. The change in his face was tiny, but it landed harder than a confession. He looked almost startled by warmth. When the bus sighed to a stop in front of us, I rose with my backpack over one shoulder. Caleb stood too, but did not follow. "Good night, Evan." I stepped onto the bus, paid my fare, and took the seat by the window. As it pulled away, I looked back. Caleb was still under the shelter, alone in the rain, holding the soup with both hands like it was the last warm thing left in the world. The next morning, Caleb Whitmore became a rumor before he became a person again. By noon, Rosie had heard from her cousin, who had heard from a woman at the dry cleaner, who had seen a business blog post with a blurry photo of Caleb standing outside our bus shelter in the rain. The headline was not kind. Billionaire Alpha spotted after midnight with unknown diner Omega. They did not use my name, but they did not need to. In the photo, my blue uniform was visible through the bus window. So was my face, turned toward him in a way that made strangers think they understood everything. By 3 in the afternoon, 2 customers had asked if I was the lucky one. By 6, someone had left a $20 bill on the table with a wink and said, "Guess you do not need tips anymore." I smiled because waiters learned to smile when swallowing glass would hurt less. Then I went into the walk-in freezer, stood between boxes of fries and burger patties, and let the cold air press against my burning cheeks. I was not ashamed of Caleb. That was the confusing part. I was ashamed of how quickly the world turned a warm bowl of soup into something dirty. When my phone buzzed, I expected Lily asking if I could bring home milk. Instead, it was a number I did not recognize. The message was short. "Mr. Whitmore has requested privacy. Please do not contact him at this time." There was no name at the bottom. No explanation. Just a sentence that made me feel foolish for thinking the night before had meant anything at all. I read it 3 times, standing under the freezer light, while my breath turned white in front of me. Then I deleted it, because pride is easier to carry when nobody can see the bruise. Caleb did not come at 2:13. He did not come at 2:14. Rosie kept glancing at the door and pretending she was not. I refilled napkins, wiped counters, and told myself I was relieved. Maybe someone in his world had finally reminded him what people in mine cost. Maybe he had looked at the photo, seen my cheap uniform and tired face beside his name, and decided silence was cleaner. Around 3, a sleek black car stopped outside the diner. For one stupid second, my chest lifted. But the woman who stepped out was not Caleb. She was tall, elegant, wearing a cream coat that probably never knew rain unless someone else held an umbrella over it. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her smile soft enough to be dangerous. "Evan Miller?" she asked when she came inside. Rosie froze behind the register. I set down the coffee pot. "Yes. I am Margaret Whitmore. Caleb's aunt." Her eyes moved over my uniform, my bandaged thumb, the tired old sneakers I wore because non-slip shoes were expensive. Not cruelly. That almost made it worse. "May we speak?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say Caleb could speak to me himself if he had something to say. But the diner had gone quiet again, and I was tired of being watched like a bad decision in motion. I followed her to the booth by the window. Caleb's booth. She sat where he usually sat. I stayed standing. Margaret noticed, then sighed. "He did not send that message." My fingers tightened around the order pad in my apron. "What message?" It was a bad lie. She knew it. His father did. The rain had stopped, but water still clung to the window in uneven lines. I stared at them instead of her face. "Why are you telling me?" "Because Caleb spent the morning in a board meeting while his father's public relations team tried to turn you into a scandal and erase you at the same time. He has not seen his phone since 10. A small, unwanted hope opened in me, and I hated it for being so easy. Margaret reached into her purse and placed something on the table. Not money. A folded paper menu from a community kitchen, old and yellowing at the edges. At the top, in faded blue ink, were the words Whitmore Sunday Kitchen. "His mother kept this in her recipe box," Margaret said. "Caleb reopened the foundation account last week. Quietly. Before the photo. Before the rumors. Before anyone could accuse him of doing it for publicity." My throat felt tight. "Why?" Margaret looked toward the empty seat across from her, as if she could still see the boy Caleb had been. "Because one night, a tired Omega under a bus shelter told him soup did not need to be impressive." I did not know what to do with that. Anger would have been simpler. Pain had become familiar enough to fold and put away. But this was different. This was Caleb being absent and present at the same time, hurting me with silence while trying, somewhere beyond my reach, to become the kind of man who would not. Margaret stood, smoothing her coat. He is colder when he is afraid, she said gently. Do not mistake that for indifference. Then she left me with the old menu, the empty booth, and the terrible realization that walking away from Caleb would not hurt because he never cared. It would hurt because maybe he did, and neither of us knew how to survive it. By the time Caleb finally came back to Rosie's diner, I had already decided to stop waiting. That is the thing about hope. People talk about it like it is soft, like a candle in a window, but sometimes hope is just another kind of hunger. It keeps you standing long after your body asks to sit down. It makes you look at the door every time the bell rings. It makes you save the last bowl of tomato soup even when you know better. I had spent 2 nights doing that. On the third, I poured the soup down the sink before 2:13 arrived. Rosie watched me from the register, her mouth pressed into a line. She did not make a joke. That was how I knew it was bad. The rain had come back, slow and steady, tapping against the windows like someone trying not to be let in. I had just finished wiping Caleb's booth when the bell rang. I did not look up right away. I knew before I saw him. The whole diner changed, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Conversations lowered. The air held its breath. Caleb stood inside the door in a charcoal suit, no coat, no umbrella, his hair damp and his face carved into that public stillness I hated because I now knew it was not strength. It was armor. Evan, he said. One word. My name had sounded different in his voice before. Careful. Curious. Almost warm. Now it sounded like something he had carried too far and did not know where to put down. I picked up the rag and folded it over my hand. Your booth is clean. His eyes moved to the empty table, then back to me. I am sorry. I laughed once, very quietly. It did not sound like me. For the message? For disappearing? For letting strangers turn me into a punch line? You may need to be more specific. He flinched barely. Anyone else would have missed it. I wished I had. All of it, he said. I was trying to fix it before I came to you. That is the problem. My voice stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. You keep trying to fix the world around me without standing beside me inside it. The cook stopped moving in the kitchen. Rosie stared down at the register, as if the buttons had suddenly become fascinating. Caleb took one step closer, then stopped himself. My father threatened your job. Lily's medical records. Your apartment lease. I thought if I moved quietly, I could protect you without dragging you through my family's dirt. And while you were being quiet, I was standing here alone. The words did not rise. They fell. Heavy. Simple. True. His face changed then, not much, but enough to make the room feel smaller. I know. I reached under the counter and pulled out the old paper menu Margaret had left me. The Whitmore Sunday Kitchen logo had softened from age, the blue ink worn at the fold. I set it on the counter between us. Your aunt said you reopened it. Caleb looked at the menu like it was a photograph of a ghost. I did. Why did you not tell me? Because I did not want you to think I was using my mother to make you forgive me. That answer hurt because it was exactly the kind of answer that belonged to him. Too careful. Too late. I slid the menu toward him. I cannot be the reason you become a better man, Caleb. His gaze lifted to mine. You are not the reason. For 1 second, the diner, the rain, the watchful silence around us all blurred at the edges. You are the first person who made me want to stop being worse. My throat closed. I hated him for saying it so gently. I hated myself for wanting to keep it. Behind the counter, beside the sugar packets, lay the black coat he had forgotten on that first rainy night at the bus shelter. I had kept it folded in a paper bag under the register, telling myself I would return it the next time he came in. Then he had stopped coming, and the coat had become something else. A proof. A mistake. A warm place I had no right to name. I took it out now and placed it in his hands. His fingers closed around the fabric slowly, as if he already knew what it meant. Evan, he said again, and this time my name cracked at the edges. I forced myself to meet his eyes. You were the first warm place I ever found, I said. I am sorry I mistook it for home. Caleb did not reach for me. He did not command, explain, or ask me to stay. He just stood there with his coat in his hands while I untied my apron, set it on the counter, and walked out into the rain before the last thing I remembered about him could become the sound of him finally breaking. For a long time after I left, Caleb did not move. Rosie told me that later, though I never asked her to. She said he stood in the middle of the diner with his coat in his hands while the rain blurred the windows and every customer suddenly found a reason to look away. The great Caleb Whitmore, the alpha who made boardrooms go silent, looked smaller under the fluorescent lights than he ever had beneath chandeliers. Maybe that was the first punishment. Not losing me. Understanding, too late, that I had never wanted him to save me from the world. I had only wanted him to stop letting me face it alone. He paid for the untouched soup, left a tip exactly equal to the meal, and walked out without calling his driver. His penthouse was waiting for him 30 stories above the city, all glass, marble, and perfect temperature control. No fryer oil. No cracked vinyl booths. No Rosie shouting at the coffee machine like it owed her child support. Just silence so expensive it echoed. On the kitchen counter sat the tomato soup recipe he had printed from an old online archive, because he did not know how to make his mother's from memory. Beside it was a grocery bag he had never unpacked. Canned tomatoes. Butter. Pepper. Saltines. One sad onion rolling loose near the sink. He looked at it for nearly a minute before realizing why the sight hurt. He had bought those things because of me. Not for me. Because of me. There was a difference, and he was only now learning how many differences he had mistaken for love. His phone was full of messages he had written and not sent. I am sorry. I should have come sooner. I was afraid. Please tell me where you are. Each one sat in the empty blue box, too small for the damage it was meant to repair. At midnight, Margaret Whitmore arrived without waiting to be invited, because apparently rich families still had spare keys even to each other's loneliness. She found him at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, staring at a pot of soup that had somehow burned on the bottom and remained watery on top. Your mother did that the first time too, she said. Caleb did not look up. I heard him. Yes. The answer was gentle, which made it worse. I thought I was protecting him. You were protecting the idea of him, Margaret said. The real Evan was standing in a diner, being humiliated by people who thought your silence gave them permission. Caleb closed his eyes. He heard my voice again, calm and tired. You keep trying to fix the world around me without standing beside me inside it. A sentence could be quiet and still leave a bruise. Margaret set something on the counter. A paper napkin from Rosie's, folded twice. On it, in my handwriting, was a list from a week earlier: Lily's inhaler, rent by Friday, bus card, apples if discounted, do not forget to eat. Caleb stared at the last line until the words blurred. Rosie found it in his apron, Margaret said. She said you should know what kind of person you almost let your father call a burden. That was when Caleb finally understood the shape of my life. Not tragic. Not helpless. Just constantly measured. Every dollar. Every meal. Every breath Lily took easily because I had made sure she could. And still, I had saved room in my tired life to notice that he never ate his soup. He turned off the stove, took the burnt pot to the sink, and washed it by hand. No staff. No assistant. No quiet delegation. Just hot water, dish soap, and his own hands learning the slow work of cleaning up what he had ruined. The next morning, the newspapers expected him at the Whitmore Quarterly Gala, where donors, cameras, and his father were waiting for the polished alpha heir. Caleb arrived exactly on time. He wore the same black suit, The same unreadable face, the same public coldness everyone trusted because they had never seen what it cost him. But folded into his breast pocket was not a silk square. It was a paper napkin from Rosie's diner, creased, ordinary, and carrying 5 words that hurt worse than any headline: "Do not forget to eat." Caleb did not make a speech about me at the gala. That was what surprised everyone. His father had expected defiance, cameras, maybe a dramatic rejection he could turn into another headline by morning. Instead, Caleb stood before a ballroom full of donors and reporters with Rosie's napkin folded in his pocket, and spoke about his mother. He spoke about a kitchen in South Baltimore where people came in cold and left with soup, bread, and enough dignity to look someone in the eye. He spoke about how charity was too often used by powerful people to feel generous without ever becoming kind. Then he paused, and for the first time in his public life, Caleb Whitmore looked tired on purpose. "I have spent years mistaking control for care," he said. "I have called silence protection because it cost me less than courage. That ends today." By noon, Whitmore's Sunday Kitchen was no longer a private foundation project hidden behind lawyers. Caleb reopened it publicly, fully funded, with every staff member paid a living wage and every meal free. His father left before dessert. The reporters chased him down the marble steps, but Caleb did not follow. He was in the hotel kitchen, sleeves rolled up, burning grilled cheese sandwiches in a way that would have made his mother either proud or deeply concerned. I did not know any of that. Until 2 weeks later, when Lily came home from school waving her phone like she had discovered a national secret. "Evan," she said, breathless, "your soup guy is on the news." I told her not to call him that. Then I watched the clip 3 times after she went to bed. He looked different. Not happier. Not fixed. Just less hidden. And maybe that was why, on the first cold Sunday of November, I took the bus to South Baltimore with a paper bag of apples discounted from the grocery store and no plan beyond seeing it for myself. The kitchen sat between a laundromat and a closed pharmacy, its windows fogged with steam. Inside, people laughed over folding tables. Volunteers carried trays. A little boy in a red hoodie dragged a chair across the floor to sit beside his grandmother. Nothing about it looked impressive. That was why it hurt so much. Caleb was at the sink washing bowls. No suit jacket. No photographers. Just rolled sleeves, damp hair, and a smear of tomato soup on his wrist. He saw me through the serving window and went completely still. Not the cold stillness. The other kind. The kind that happened when a person was afraid to move because the moment might disappear. I almost left. My hand was already on the door. Then Lily, who had insisted on coming and pretended it was for community service hours, pushed past me with the apples. "We brought fruit," she announced. "Also, Evan made me promise not to be weird, but I am very bad at promises." Caleb looked at her, then at me, and something gentle broke across his face. "Thank you," he said. Not to impress. Not to soften me. Just because apples mattered. I did not forgive him that day. Healing does not work like a movie scene. There was no sudden embrace, no music swelling, no perfect sentence that erased every lonely night between us. I helped peel apples. Caleb burned only one more sandwich. Lily corrected his technique with the confidence of a 14-year-old who had watched half a cooking video online. When the crowd thinned and the sky outside turned lavender, Caleb walked me to the bus stop. He kept both hands in his coat pockets. "I will not ask you to come back," he said. "Good. I will ask if I may earn the right to know you again." The bus lights appeared at the far end of the block, small and golden through the cold. I looked at him, really looked, and saw no rescue plan waiting in his eyes. No panic. No possession. Just a man learning how to stand beside someone without reaching too soon. "Sunday," I said. "The kitchen needs apples." Caleb nodded once, but his breath left him like he had been holding it for years. Months passed that way. Apples, soup, short walks, hard conversations, silence that no longer punished. He met me where I was, and slowly, I stopped running from warmth just because it had once burned. By spring, there was a chair for me beside his at the kitchen after closing, and Caleb never ate alone unless I was late. Even then, he waited. Not because I needed saving. Because he had finally learned the quietest kind of forever, staying.